Hello and welcome. Today we are delighted to have with us Suman Shah, the Boston Public Library's newly appointed chef in residence. Suman brings with her culinary experience and passion for food, culture, and community to this unique role at one of Boston's most prominent public institutions. Through her residency, she will engage with the community through cooking while exploring the connections between food, nutrition, education, and cultural heritage. Thank you for joining us today. It's wonderful to have you with us.
Bhavna, thank you so much for having me, and I really appreciate the publication for having me as well. And I'm excited to talk about the new role and, tell everyone and your readers about it.
I'm sure this is the first question many people have. Why does a library need a chef in residence, and what exactly does your role involve?
Sure, that is a great question. And the way the library and the Boston Public Library and the Boston Public Fund look at it is that literacy is at the center of it, and libraries are the center for literacy, right? So when you look at it that way, free public access to learning about how to eat better or how to cook better for yourself, bringing in the nutritional part of that, or just bringing in the healthier, aspects of cooking into someone's life is also part of the mission that they're trying to, accomplish. So I think that, encompasses everything that Boston Public Library is trying to do by providing access to that kind of culinary programs so that the patrons who can access it can come and learn about different cultures, how different, recipes are made. And also there are programs that talk about nutrition in more depth, that, sometimes is inaccessible or very confusing when you're on the internet.
For people who may not be familiar with the program, what can they expect to experience when they attend one of your programs or cooking sessions at the library?
Sure. So the overarching aspect of the program is done in such a way that we are trying to incorporate different heritages, different cultures, and also different methods of cooking. So, for example, if you come to a session that I'm teaching, you may see, us celebrating, let's say in September, the Hispanic Heritage Month. And what that means is I'm doing currently research and writing recipes and testing recipes on what we can teach people coming from that heritage. So, for example, I know that, in India, we use lots of beans and legumes and things like that. And so does the Hispanic heritage. So, I'm trying to look at the similarities between the two cultures and then draw inspiration from the Hispanic culture and create recipes for that. So, you're going to learn probably how to make beans. You're going to probably learn how to make, something with chocolate, because the South American, countries are a rich culture where chocolate is grown. So there's a lot of different ways to incorporate heritage and bring it to a recipe.
Wonderful. Tell us a little about your own journey into food and cooking. Was becoming a chef something you always envisioned for yourself?
That is a, that is a good question. No, that was not something I started out with. I spent almost 20, 25 years in a different career. In fact, since you're in India, it may be relevant to you, is that I used to work at Times of India. And, I spent almost 5 years working there. And then when I immigrated to the US, I, changed career paths a little bit, but I always stayed in communication and advertising. That is what my master's is in. And so, yeah, I spent, almost 20 years in that industry. I only went into food and teaching after a very life changing event. And hence the name of my business, I guess, is also called Fork on a Road. I was at a fork in my own life and I created something that was more meaningful to me. It had to do with food because I had spent about 3 to 4 years taking care of my sick parents in India along with my siblings. But my main focus during that period was on food and what we were feeding them as their health was declining. That became a big component of my life. So when I was looking to do something new, I knew that I did not want to go back into the corporate life. And so I started teaching cooking classes in different, scenarios, like at farmers markets, at private institutions and places. And then from that, the products were born, because whatever I was hearing from people was the kind of products I created. So everything that I do is rooted in our sort of, the intrinsic Ayurvedic way of life that we all lead in India, and why we eat certain foods, when do we eat them, for what seasons we eat them. So that all becomes a huge part of what I'm trying to do.
Have your Indian roots, family traditions, and upbringing influenced your relationship with food?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can see the image behind me. It's of a turmeric blend, right? And I created that turmeric blend, and I had to give it sort of, that nod to our heritage. And so that blend is called Grandma's Gold. And basically, I wanted to introduce the US market to that spice blend, because over here, people were just, you know, in a trendy way, drinking golden lattes or golden milk. And it was just like my way of saying, like, no, our grandmothers have been making golden milk or haldi doodh for all of us for centuries, right? Like, even though my grandmother didn't live for centuries, but that's the meaning behind it. Um, but what I realized and what I teach people is that a spice blend can do multiple things. Yes, you can make a golden latte with it, but I've also taught classes where I make a soup with it, or I'll make, some roasted vegetables with it, or do other things with it. So it's very important to teach people how to use spices, because I also think that living in the America, or maybe other places in the West where they're not as conversant as using spices, I think this becomes a way for people to feel healthier in their life when they're using freshly blended spices that are sourced ethically.
Indian cuisine is incredibly diverse. Are there particular regional dishes, ingredients, or culinary traditions that you feel especially connected to and hope to share with the Boston community?
Yeah, in my process of learning recipes and creating new, stuff, products, or even just, recipes for writing or testing, what I realize is that all ancient cultures, whether they be indigenous Indian American culture or Hispanic culture, or even like the Caribbean, diaspora, the way they cook, the African diaspora, how they cook, there's a lot of reasons behind it. And similar to our Indian traditions, the reasons are lost with each generation because we are not talking about it often. So there are chefs now in each of those, diasporas. They are digging deeper into their own roots, just like how I am. So I find a lot of commonality and connections between those things. I'll give you, for example, that how we use fennel in India as a digestion spice, right? So we'll drink fennel tea or we'll chew fennel seeds after a meal for digestion. Similarly, European herbalism or ancient European herbalism has used fennel, fresh fennel, as a digestive aid. So they'll, shave some fresh fennel and then they'll eat it as a salad or something like that. Similarly, in TCM or traditional Chinese medicine, fennel is used for digestion as well. So, a lot of different ancient cultures have come to the same conclusion using the same ingredients. So, that is where I find my inspiration and similarities. And it's very easy then to teach people that, hey, our ancient ancestors did this without the medical industry approving or not. Um, so there are things in our own kitchens that we can use for our own health. Not that you don't need health interventions and medication when you need it. I'm a cancer survivor. I've had cancer twice. Of course, I went through my treatments and surgeries and chemo and all that, but I used my kitchen as a support system for myself. So, how do I feel better on a day I'm really down? Or how do I make my tummy feel better? Or how do I get a little more energy and protein? So, all those little things come from your kitchen.
In your role at the Boston Public Library, do you see
Yeah.
yourself bringing Indian food and cultural traditions into your programming? If so, what would that mean to you personally?
Yeah, that is a really great question. So, we, like I said, celebrate the different heritage months that are there. And those are, put in place by the Boston Public Library as a whole organization. Along with that, I have, my director, Stephanie, and the team have given me the freedom to sort of also bring in other aspects of maybe Indian cuisine to it. The way I look at Indian cuisine is introducing people to techniques and maybe flavors or how to use spices, because I feel that the Indian tradition really has honed down and the complexity of how to use spices. Um, I I think the close second would be probably the Mexican or the Hispanic heritage, where they really use spices as well, at least from what I see from the outside, right? Um, I think those are the ways where I can sneak in the use of spices in your daily recipes. Like, for example, if I'm teaching people how to make a pot of beans for the Hispanic Heritage Month, I'm going to introduce some spices to it that may cross over in both the heritages, but the technique of it. So, for example, there's a technique in India where we, in the Western culinary parlance, they'll say bloom the spices, right? So maybe I'll bloom the spices in oil, hot oil, like we do the tadka, and then I'll add the onions and the aromatics and everything else. So that is how I teach. I sneak in our techniques into everyday cooking so that people are getting the best benefits and flavor from their recipes.
That's beautiful. Food can be a very powerful connection to home, particularly for immigrants and their children. How have you seen food help people maintain a connection to their culture and identity?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Food is and the aroma of that food is the first trigger of a memory, right? You smell the halwa cooking or the ghee being roasted or, something like that. Or you can smell maybe, uh, a pot of chana boiling or some biryani or pulao, that aroma that is coming, right? And immediately you're taken back home. Either your mom made it or dadima made it or whoever, auntie made rotis. Like, I learned how to make rotis from my auntie. I would watch her and observe her, that kind of stuff. So yeah, the aromas are a big part of that trigger. And I'm also a big believer that food that triggers nostalgia has the power to keep us healthier, and also, maybe because I'm a cancer survivor, also heal us in a way that we can't really pinpoint or quantify it from a medical standpoint. So, for example, I will say this from my learned experience, not any scientific experience, is that when you're sick, and if, let's say, if you're of a diaspora that is, let's say, Chinese American or Asian American in general, what you grew up with, or what your grandma made or what your mom made, and if you're given a bowl of that soup, you will feel warm and loved and cared for, and maybe the healing is a little bit faster because your body is telling you you're safe. And similarly, when I was going through stuff, if I ate a bowl of khichdi, or if I ate a bowl of, like I said, a halwa or a shira on a day that I needed energy, I felt loved and I felt safe and I felt nourished. So I think there is a big connection between food memories and the feeling of nourishment, especially from a diasporic point of view. That definitely connects you back to your roots. Because when you immigrate to a different country and you're trying to assimilate and you're trying new things and all these things, you sometimes feel very unrooted, right? Like you don't really know who you are. And I honestly think food for me, when I started on this journey, was not only a way of reconnecting to my roots, but also maybe a part of grieving because I had lost both my parents and I had spent almost 4 years taking care of them. So now every recipe that I made that maybe my mother had taught me or my father had enjoyed, to me, I was making their memory come alive again. So if I made chana masala, I was thinking of when Papa was a student in BHU in Banaras and when he would talk about eating chana on the streets as a street food. So, it's just things like that. So to me, that is how I keep a recipe alive. It's because it's in the memory of somebody. So that's sort of like my take on diaspora and food memories and how we feel rooted to it when you make something or when you eat something.
That's beautiful. Do you think there are any misconceptions about Indian or vegetarian food that you would like to challenge through your work?
Oh my God, yes, there is a huge part of it. First of all, I think when people, especially, my experiences, because I also have food products, my food products are not just Indian. I do global flavors, but I bring the Indian um, mentality to it in how I mix and balance the flavors, right? So first of all, when people see me, let's say at an event or a farmer's market or something where I'm selling my product, their first reaction mentally is that because I look Indian, I must be selling Indian food. So sometimes I'll get a reaction that says, "Oh, I don't like Indian food, it's too spicy." Or they'll say, "I don't like curry." Or some of them will say, "I don't eat vegetarian." And so that is interesting to me. And it also becomes a really great conversation starter. Because what I'm trying to understand most of the time is that what aspect of that are they really hesitant about? And if they've only been exposed to restaurant food, yes, they may find it spicy. But as you know, and as a lot of people, of Indian origin know, all Indian food is not spicy. Especially home cooked food is not super spicy. Unless you're from certain regions where they eat spicier food, whether it's the Konkan or, other areas. Um, so that becomes an education point to me for them. It's like, no, actually, home cooking is not that spicy. And you can add or, remove spice depending on your preference. So that is one part of it. The second is the comment that it's like, I don't use spices. So my commentary, or my conversation to them begins with, yeah, but do you know that pepper actually is the biggest spice that is grown in India and trade wars went after it? The spice trade was the biggest thing during colonization and all these other things. So there are different conversations to be had. Um, the third one is that I don't like curry, right? And so, of course, in the West, the word curry has become emblem an emblem to Indian food. And it's like, no, there is no such thing as curry in India. So that is the education point from my perspective. Usually tell them like, what do you mean by curry? And that starts the conversation. Or I'll say, actually, do you know that there's no such thing as curry in India? So I'm not really sure what aspect of curry you don't enjoy. And then that starts a conversation. So it's again piquing people's curiosity. It's about education, but it's also about kindness, right? Like, let's say that you and I, who grew up in India, are not very familiar with foods that are, let's say, made with seaweed in it, right? It's not part of our palate. But in Japanese food, they use seaweed a lot. And so, if let's say I approach someone from Japan and say, "Oh, I don't like seaweed," but that's very dismissive of the culture. And it's a blanket statement. So I want to approach that kind of a conversation with kindness and education. That we use what grows around us, as any culture does, right? And so that is what people need to understand, is that not everybody grew up around tomatoes, eggplant, and peppers, because that seems to be like, the big um, vegetable culture here, like the basic things. So yeah, that's sort of my approach, is like those are the things I brush up against, and then you have to have a, um, intelligent and informative conversation about it.
Beyond teaching people to cook, what kind of conversations about Indian culture, identity, or community do you hope your food will spark?
I think the biggest hope is that whether it's through the program at the Boston Public Library or through any other teaching programs and my website or the products, I think the biggest thing that I want to have people understand is that don't look at another cuisine as exotic. It is a way of life, especially in cultures that have such a rich history of food like India does. There are so many complex flavors. They change from every 100 kilometer, every village to village it changes, every recipe changes. And I think people, now that they are traveling more, they're exposed to social media more, I think people are a little bit more aware. So let's say 20 years ago or even 25 years ago, when I first moved to this country, um, we couldn't easily find hara dhania or cilantro because it was a rare commodity. The Western culture wasn't using it as much, but now you can find cilantro in every grocery store. We had to go specifically to the Indian grocery store to find it, right? So it's just that even the palate and the culture of eating has changed abroad as well. So I think people are more receptive to not only Indian food, but they're also now more aware that there are similarities between this culture or that culture, or they're open to seeing the similarities. So I think that shift is in favor of anybody exploring Indian culture or Indian food. And then talking about identity, the way I, let's say, create the masalas for my brand is like it's reclaiming claiming that identity. Because if it becomes a barista culture where everybody is making golden milk using a syrup, versus understanding what spices actually go into it and why do we use those spices, especially in the colder months versus in the warmer months, right? So I think taking back those conversations and teaching people about that is sort of reclaiming that identity. It's like, no, 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 wait a second. Yes, I understand you love pumpkin latte spice and whatever, but do you know what's actually the flavor in it? And then having that conversation. So it's, I think those are the kinds of little things you can do as a person of diaspora to claim back certain parts of your culture and also feel really proud to share it,
That's
because
beautiful.
food is meant to be shared.
Correct. And
Yeah.
finally, Suman, when your residency comes to an end, what do you
Yeah.
hope people, particularly members of the Indian and South Asian diaspora, will remember about your time at the Boston Public Library?
I just hope that they take away how warm and memorable a meal can be. Because I think India and Indian people are known for their hospitality. Of course, as chef in residence, I'm not, uh, it's not like I'm hosting them, they're coming to learn. But at the same time, I want them to feel empowered, that they've learned something new, or they're taking away a wealth of knowledge from those classes that I've taught over the next 10, 11 months. Is that all the things that they learned are something that enrich their life, right? So that's my, it'll be the biggest sort of gift, is that if they feel enriched and if they remember that class or that session or whatever with a memory that gives them joy, that I think is the best um, reward that I can get. The other part of it is, of course, about nutritional literacy, is that they should feel that they know how to use turmeric better. or they learned how to use, mustard seeds in a way that was unique to them, not just in the form of mustard, which comes in a bottle, right? Um, let's say that they learned something about not only Indian culture, but how cultures are connected through food, because Indians use tomatoes and hot peppers so easily, right? And in everyday cooking, but or potatoes. But you know what? The Portuguese introduced all those to the Indian food system. We did not have tomatoes as a native food. We did not have chilies as a native food. Neither did we have potatoes as a native food. So all those came with the trade that happened in the ancient days, right? So to me, that is the connectivity. So understanding that all our diets have been impacted by each other because of the way the world was. So I think that's the bigger picture to take away, is that we are more connected and similar through our food.
That's it from my end. Thank you so much for talking with us and sharing all of these beautiful insights. And wishing you all the
I
luck and success with your program as well.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate it. And I really appreciate this position, especially, it is funded by the Boston Public Library Fund, the BPL Fund. And, um, they had the confidence to hire me. So I want to make sure that I do it complete justice. So that's sort of, my mission, is to do justice to what the fund and the library need.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll just stop recording it. Just give me a minute.